In 1950, there was a Bible in 90% of American homes. It was not sitting on a shelf. It was used every day, in 15 ways almost nobody remembers now. They were the quiet glue that held families upright. I went through devotion manuals from the 1950s and more than 200 first-hand accounts to piece them together. Number 8 has an exact date of death, June 17th, 1963. And number 1 was never read at all. It was written by hand, and American courts accepted it as legal proof. You think these traditions disappeared because people stopped believing. But the faith barely changed. What disappeared was something else, and it left without making a sound. Number 15, the little box that opened before the bread. At the center of the breakfast table sat a small box. In millions of kitchens, it was shaped like a loaf of bread with gold letters. Our daily bread. Inside, 240 cards, each carrying a single verse. Every morning, before anyone touched a fork, the youngest child pulled one out and read it aloud. Maybe that child was you. It was not decoration. It was an order. In that house, the first food of the day was not the bread, and handing it to the youngest had a reason. The child was not watching his parents' faith from the outside. He was serving it. Nobody decided to put it away. Breakfast simply stopped existing. Split schedules, cereal eaten standing up. One morning, the box was on a shelf. A year later, in a moving box. They still make them for less than $12. In an online auction, a woman bought a used one and wrote, "My aunt kept one on her table 73 years ago. Today, it sits on mine." But the box only opened the morning. There were other words every child carried inside, paid for in gold stars. Number 14, the words that were worth a star. Every Sunday you were assigned one verse, just one. For the whole week, it was yours. You repeated it on the walk to school, and at supper, the moment arrived. You stood and recited it, start to finish, while your mother listened with a tuned ear. Almost right did not count. Every word had to be exact, just as the King James read. If you got it, a gold star went next to your name on the Sunday school chart. A full row was the pride of an entire year. It looked like a memory game. It was not. It was luggage. Sentences learned at 7 never left. They came back on their own, 40 years later, in a hospital, at a funeral, on a night with no sleep. Your parents were not making you memorize. They were provisioning you. Memorization disappeared from schools, and soon after, from everything else. Nobody banned it. People simply decided carrying things inside was no longer necessary, now that everything could be looked up. One verse a month, out loud at the table. Brings it back. Knowing the words was one thing. Finding them at full speed was a sport, with military commands. Number 13, attention. Draw swords. That is exactly how it sounded. A row of children, each holding a closed Bible high, arms stretched out. The teacher called the reference, Psalm 91, verse 1. A beat of silence. Then, charge. Pages flew like a flutter of doves. The first to find it jumped up and read it out loud, breathless. It was called a sword drill, because the Bible was the sword. Ephesians 6:17. The trick nobody explained. That game took away the fear. The most solemn book in the house became your territory. A kid who won sword drills never again felt the Bible was a stranger's book. He knew his way around inside. Church projection screens killed it. Once the verse appeared on the wall, nobody needed to find the page. The fingers went still. 2 matching Bibles and 1 grandchild bring it back. Lose the first round on purpose. Sundays hid 1 more hour. After the meal, it smelled like tissue paper. Number 12. The tissue paper. On Sunday afternoons when the dishes were done and the house had gone quiet, your mother sat down with a thick hardcover, the Eggermeyers, or the Hurlbutts, depending on the house. Inside were full-color plates, David with his sling, Daniel among the lions, and every plate was protected by a sheet of tissue paper that crackled when you lifted it. That crackle was the sound of Sunday. The children on the floor, whispering over who got to pick the story. That book was a doorway. When, years later, they set the grown-up Bible in front of you, tight print, no pictures, you already knew everyone who lived inside. You were not walking into a stranger's house. You were coming home. The Eggermeyers has been in print since 1922. More than 2 million copies. What went out of print was the afternoon. Sunday television claimed that exact hour, and the armchair turned away. The books are still in print. The hour is up to you. Something in those houses needed no hour at all. It had hung on the wall for years, saying the same thing. Number 11. You read it 1,000 times without noticing. Over the kitchen door, or in the entryway. Cross-stitched in faded thread, or painted by hand on a plaster plaque. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. In other homes it said, God bless our home. Someone had embroidered it stitch by stitch across an entire winter. A mother by the lamp. After the dishes. Months of work to hang 7 words. Those 7 words worked in 2 directions. Facing out, a declaration. Every visitor who crossed that door knew who the house belonged to, without a word. And facing you, you passed under it 10 times a day. And without reading it, you read it. At 40, you could close your eyes and see every letter, the color of thread. Then, decorating became a catalog. Walls started matching the sofa instead of saying something, and they went silent. 1 framed verse, hung where you see it walking in. That is all. Some words stayed still on a wall. Others crossed oceans with a postmark. Number 10. Numbers and a colon at the bottom of the letter. Letters back then signed off the same way. With love. A name. And underneath, in smaller handwriting, something that looked like a code. Philippians 4:13. Psalm 121. Nothing else. Whoever received it looked the verse up, and there was the real ending. I can do all things through Christ, who strengthens me. Soldiers wrote it from Korea next to their names, and mothers wrote back with a different verse, chosen carefully. There were entire conversations, months long, built of crossed verses. Because that generation did not know how to write, I love you. They had been raised not to say such things, so they said it with numbers. A father who never hugged you in public would send you Psalm 91, the one about being sheltered under his wings. That was the hug. You had to look it up, but it was there. Nothing in particular killed it. The letter died, and the sacred postscript went with it. It fits in any birthday card. 1 reference under your signature. Whoever looks it up will find the message. Letters arrived 1 at a time, but 1 voice entered every house in the country at the same hour. Number 9. Sunday night, everyone staring at a piece of furniture. The radio was a big wooden cabinet with gold fabric over the speaker. When its hour came, the whole family sat around it and looked. That is how you listened back then, watching. The Lutheran hour, since 1930, back to the Bible, since 1939, and the old-fashioned revival hour with Pastor Charles Fuller, which played on more than 650 stations at once. The hymns came out a little tinny, and your mother hummed along while she sewed. Think about that. The farm in Kansas, the apartment in Chicago, the porch in Georgia, hearing the same words in the same minute. An entire country with a single weekly pulse. Radio asked for something that sounds old-fashioned today, imagining together. Television did not compete with that. It simply switched on the pictures, and every head stopped making its own. Several of those programs never went off the air. Still there. Now, the date I promised you at the beginning, June 17th, 1963, a Tuesday. Number 8. School began with an open book. Every school morning of your childhood started the same. A classmate, sometimes over the loudspeaker, voice trembling, read 10 verses from the Bible. 10, not one more. Then everyone stood, and the Lord's Prayer in unison. Pencils freshly sharpened, the classroom smelling of chalk. In Pennsylvania, it was the law since 1949. More than 30 states had it in their rules. School and home spoke the same language. The morning verse was the echo of the one you heard in your own kitchen. Two worlds holding each other up. This tradition has an exact date of death. A 16-year-old student objected. His family went to court, and on June 17, 1963, the Supreme Court ruled, 8 votes to 1, that mandatory Bible reading could not continue in public schools. In September, the classrooms opened without it. That fast. Nobody outlawed your breakfast table. 10 verses over breakfast are still legal. One reading a year no court ever touched. And it faded too. It happened on the night of December 24th. Number 7. The presents could wait. There they were, under the tree, wrapped, 3 feet from your hands. Nobody touched them. Because first your father brought down the big Bible, sat by the lamp, and found a page that opened on its own by now. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 2. And it came to pass in those days, the whole birth, out loud, without skipping a verse. The shepherds, the manger, the multitude of angels. He read it with the same cadence every year. Only when he closed the book did Christmas begin. That wait was the cleanest lesson of the year. Nobody preached about what mattered most. You saw it. The present waited for the story, not the other way around. Then Christmas sped up. The television specials, the assault on the wrapping paper at 7 in the morning. The reading did not fit in that noise, and it was left outside. The chapter is still there. 15 minutes this Christmas Eve, in your voice. That big Bible held more than words. Open it to the Psalms and shake it gently. Something might fall out. Number 6. The Bible was also the family safe. If you ever opened it out of curiosity, you know what was inside. A pressed rose, dark and flat as paper, from a funeral in 1948. A lock of fine hair tied with thread. Somebody's first haircut. A telegram folded in 4. A 4-leaf clover. Yellowed newspaper clippings. Nothing was there by accident. Everything had its page. The funeral rose rested in the Psalms, on the very verse read that day. The book kept the memory and the place of the memory. Whatever could not be lost went inside the one book that would never be thrown away. No safer box in the house. Then the keepsakes moved out, into albums, into shoeboxes, into the cloud, and they stopped having a page. Find your family's old Bible and open it slowly. Something may have been waiting between 2 verses for 70 years, but there were marked days when the book itself was handed over, dressed in white. Number 5. The book that walked down the aisle. Brides back then carried something almost nobody remembers now. a small white Bible, bound in cloth or mother of pearl, carried in both hands to the altar. Many carried it under the bouquet, ribbons trailing. It was not an accessory. It was her mother's, or a new one she would keep all her life to lend her daughter someday. And there was another one just as serious, the graduation or confirmation Bible, your name stamped in gold on the cover, and inside, a presentation page written by hand with the date. At every threshold of life, marrying, graduating, being confirmed, they handed you the same book. The message needed no words. This goes with you into the next stage. You were not going alone. The gift changed its nature, from for the rest of your life to for this season. And the names stopped being stamped. At the next family wedding or graduation, give one with the name in gold. Watch the face. And between thresholds, there was one that never rested, not even at night. Number 4, open, even while you slept. In the living room, on its own little table or wooden stand, sat a Bible that was never closed. Nobody said anything on top of it, not the newspaper, not the keys. Near it, without any written rule. Voices dropped. Every day a hand, almost always your mother's, turned the page, or left it on the one the house needed. There was the secret you discovered as a child, without knowing its name. The open page was the day's report. Sickness in the house. Psalm 91. A death in the family. Psalm 23. Good news. A psalm of thanks. You learned to read your mother by which page she had chosen, before she said a word. A closed book is an object. An open one is someone present in the room. The television took the center of the living room. The furniture turned to face the screen, and the little table was left out. A stand and an open page bring it back. Turn the page when the week turns. Some words never needed a page at all. I can prove it to you right now. Number 3. Finish this sentence. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. You said it inside before you could stop yourself. 60 years later, there it is. Intact. That is not memory. That is something else. Remember the gold stars from number 14? This verse was the first one everybody learned. That is where it began. You learned it before age 8, from your mother's voice, line by line. One knee against the bedspread. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. Your whole generation carried it, word for word. And it was not habit. It was emergency luggage. Words loaded in childhood for the days when there would be no strength left to look for words. That is why it was recited in hospital beds with eyes closed, in foxholes, at gravesides, when the pastor's voice broke and the other voices carried it. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, nobody read it in those moments. It came out on its own. It was killed by the same thing that killed number 14. The idea that carrying things inside was no longer necessary. You still have the whole thing. Teach it to a grandchild, line by line, the way it was given to you. It is the one gift that will last them 80 years. Your mother gave you that one at night, but another voice across the house almost never spoke until the book opened. Number 2, the man who barely spoke. Your father could sit through an entire supper in silence. Work, exhaustion. That way, he had of being there without saying. But when the table was cleared, he did not get up. He reached for the Bible, and then he did speak, slowly, his finger following the line. A short passage, sometimes a hymn sung low, all together, a prayer, and off to bed. They called it the family altar, though there was no altar. There was a kitchen table and a voice. Ask anyone from your generation how they remember their father's voice. Many only have it one way: reading. And something worked there that no sermon ever managed. Watching the strongest man you knew bow his head before something greater than himself. Humility was not explained in that house. It was watched. Television claimed that exact hour. The machine that asked for no responses, only silence. And the last voice the family heard together each night stopped being their own. 5 verses after supper. Screens off. 7 nights in a row. That brings it back. Now, number 1. I told you it was never read. Open your family's Bible right down the middle. Number 1. It was not read. It was written. Between the Old Testament and the New, the family Bible carried pages unlike the others, with ornate borders and lettering, births, marriages, deaths. And there, by hand, your entire family was written down. Different inks, different hands, 3 generations of handwriting. The day you were born, your father uncapped the pen and wrote your name inside the Bible. It is probably still there. Here is what almost nobody knows. Those pages were a legal document. American courts accepted them as proof of birth, age, and marriage. Before modern record-keeping, the Bible was this country's civil registry. Now you understand the other 14. That is why the flowers were kept inside it. That is why the bride carried it down the aisle. That is why it was never closed. Why your father opened it every night. It was not the family's book. The family was written inside the book. And when people stopped writing in it, it stopped being our Bible and became a Bible. The other 14 traditions lost their ground that same decade, one by one. On some shelf or some attic, there is a Bible with names you know. Maybe yours. The ink gone brown. Go find it this week. But these 15 traditions were only half the story. Because that generation did not just have customs around a book. It had habits of faith that made it the strongest this country has ever known. And those are being forgotten too, one by one. I gathered them in this video. 15 forgotten faith habits that kept the greatest generation strong. It is on your screen. Start with number 12.